Hello, I'm Ellen Bintz, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, or maybe just need to discuss a little bit, like today's topic, right?
Exactly.
And see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's July 2nd, 2025.
Yeah, as you were saying, a couple of days away from the big celebration in the US.
Yes, here in the US,
Yeah. And
yes.
I didn't realize, I should have noticed this before, but it's the same week as Canada Day.
Yes. Yeah.
So presumably they had their fireworks yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, whatever you're doing, if you're celebrating 4th of July, enjoy.
Thank you. We will.
So last week, we looked at how some leaders manipulate and misrepresent others to keep control for themselves. So we thought that this week we might turn to the flip side of this to talk about honesty. We're now, believe it or not, midway through the year. So as a new quarter dawns in the Global Healing Response calendar, and with it, a new focus on the running theme of GHR for the year, which is authenticity. This quarter, the theme is, as it happens, and perhaps not so coincidentally, knowing how these things happen, honesty. Honesty is something many of us may recognize as a noble value. We imagine that, like us, most of our listeners will have grown up being taught the importance of honesty and may seek to uphold that teaching in our lives. Do I ever tell a lie? Never. Not me. Might be what we tell ourselves. But are there subtle, perhaps not obvious ways in which dishonesty can creep into our conversations and dealings with others? What about the reasons those holding power on the world stage, within organizations or in relationships, may choose to be dishonest, sometimes with dire consequences for others? And what does honesty really mean? These are the questions we'll dive into in this episode. So, let's get diving.
Yeah, this is a complicated one, right?
Yeah, it is. And
Well,
I was actually just reflecting on, I won't go into detail because I don't want to betray confidences and so on, but I was on the wrong side of an organization the other day, which had its statement about, we are an inclusive organization. And this was just in an email exchange. And pretty much in the next sentence, there was something which totally belied that statement. A principle that really was really unnecessary. And this was the LGBT community. All I wanted was just to mention briefly was to have a little promotion for a Pride event that was going on in the city in a newsletter. And kind of the response was, well, we don't want to upset people. Well, so my response was, well, you're upsetting a lot of people by taking that view.
Yeah. And we talk about this. We'll get into this a little bit about tempering your honesty.
But
and so here's an example. Yeah.
You hear this from every organization, don't you? Whenever there's something that goes on that gets media attention, public attention, the press department comes out and says, oh, this is our policy, this is our values. And then it doesn't really take very much to see that not everybody is living to those values.
And sometimes it's not even conscious.
No.
Well,
I think this is the thing. This is why feedback can be important.
Yeah. Right. So with that said, let's start with a key question. When we talk about being authentic, what's the true meaning of honesty? As we know, honesty traditionally means telling the truth and not deceiving others. But when we connect it to authenticity, the meaning deepens. At the surface level, honesty is simply saying what is true and avoiding lies. But at a deeper level, it means being honest with ourselves and others about our thoughts, feelings, and identity. For example, this means expressing a genuine opinion, like you said, even if when this is unpopular, or showing our true self instead of pretending to be someone else. Being authentic means living in alignment with our values, beliefs, and emotions. Well, honesty is the act of expressing that alignment outwardly and inwardly. I love that sentence right
Mm,
there. The link between the two matters as honesty provides the bridge between our inner truth and how we present ourselves to the world. If we are to be honest in every situation, we need to be sure that we always align our actions with our values, both in private and in public. This means being mindful of what we are doing and saying in every interaction with others. Is this something we can honestly say we always do? I, for one, confess I have some work to do here. Even if I like to think that most of the time I'm being honest with myself and others and don't set out to deceive. And like I said, sometimes it's not even conscious,
no, no, exactly, exactly. And we when we're speaking from the heart, often it isn't very, very conscious, is it? It's just what's
right?
coming out.
Well, and sometimes I think the universe, God, however you like to think of the bigger picture, has to show you this outside of yourself
Mm,
before you
mm,
can see it and the light
mm,
bulb goes on and you
exactly.
say, "Oh,
Yep.
oh, I do that.
Yep.
Oh." So watch, listeners, as after listening to this,
Yeah. All
there
this.
might be some ways that you get called to the mat on this.
Exactly. Exactly. We should also bear in mind several common misconceptions about honesty and authenticity that can affect how we approach relationships and perceive ourselves. Firstly, here, we might mention the idea that honesty means always telling the whole truth, no matter what. In other words, there's never an excuse for a white lie. For some, this means sharing every thought or opinion regardless of the impact. This is actually a misunderstanding of what both honesty and authenticity mean. True honesty allows for discretion and empathy. Sometimes, of course, withholding certain information is kinder and more respectful than being brutally honest. The second common misconception is that honesty is only about factual accuracy. While telling the truth is important, honesty also involves sharing our genuine feelings and motivations, as we just said, not just the facts. Some people use facts as a shield to avoid vulnerability or deeper emotional connection. We might be wise to remember this. Then there's the maxim many of us will have been taught: honesty is always the best policy, even if it hurts. This idea is likely oversimplified. I certainly was taught that. I grew up believing
Mhm.
it. Yeah, yeah. Honesty should be balanced with consideration for others' feelings and the context of the relationship we're in. As we said before, sometimes holding back from saying everything is the kindest thing to do. An obvious example, perhaps, that many of us might be able to relate to is when breaking bad news to a loved one, such as a stark health diagnosis. We may not deny the reality of the situation, but not have to fill in with every precise detail or leave out the possibility of hope. However, honesty is rarely more hurtful than lying. While being honest can sometimes sting, the damage from dishonesty is often much deeper and longer lasting. So, once again, honesty should be delivered with care and empathy, not as an excuse to be rude or harsh.
And wisdom and discernment are
Exactly. Mm,
critical things to hold there too.
mm,
There are also some common myths about what being authentic means that we might mention here. So, firstly, authenticity means being the same in every situation. Authenticity is not about acting the same way with everyone. It's about being true to our core values and feelings while adjusting our expression based on the context. Healthy boundaries mean we may reveal different parts of ourselves depending on the situation and people we're with. That's tricky.
mm.
Next, the myth that authenticity requires radical honesty or oversharing. Being authentic does not mean we have to share our deepest secrets or feelings with everyone. It's about being genuine in our interactions, but also being discerning about what and how much we share. And thirdly, we might challenge the idea that authenticity is a static state. Authenticity isn't a fixed trait. It evolves as we grow and change, or we hope it does.
Mm.
We may express different aspects of ourselves at different stages of life or in different relationships. We evolve, and if we're on a spiritual journey of deepening and understanding of ourselves and correcting what we discover that we don't like, we will change. One final myth we might mention is that authenticity doesn't mean that we always are expressing our emotions, nor is it about revealing deep shame or pain. While being authentic involves self awareness, of course, it doesn't mean we must always act on or express every emotion we feel. Rather, it involves choosing how and when to share our true self based on what's appropriate and healthy. In most cases, authenticity can be as simple as being present and genuine in everyday interactions.
So, why is honesty important in leadership, in politics, and organizations? Perhaps unsurprisingly, honesty in leadership, whether in politics or other organizations, is critically important. Together with transparency, is the foundation of trust between leaders and their constituents, employees, and stakeholders. Without trust, effective collaboration and progress are usually difficult to achieve. Honesty strengthens democratic and organizational integrity. In politics, ensuring that democratic institutions function properly and that leaders are held accountable, and within organizations, creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up, innovate, and contribute. Honest leaders are more likely to admit mistakes and take responsibility, in turn encouraging a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. When communicating openly and honestly, leaders encourage better informed decision making while attracting support, loyalty, and investment, which are, of course, essential for long term success. Fundamentally, honest leadership sets a standard for ethical behavior both within organizations and society as a whole, discouraging corruption and unethical practices and serving as a role model to others. Well, to be a whistleblower can be very hard, I think. It takes huge courage, potentially risking your whole career. And I read a case this week of someone who took their own life after they were seemingly harassed, having been essentially fired for whistleblowing. This was a big corporation. Really, really disturbing. But there are some examples, aren't there, of some who really are taking that very courageous, very honest, authentic approach.
There was a story in the United States, and I believe he was a major. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I don't know the details, but I'm sure someone can find it if they're interested. And he, though his own personal beliefs didn't align with the transgender issue, unfortunately. But anyway, he did. He considers himself an evangelical conservative Christian. But he said he can't stay in the military with that decision because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Mm,
affect any, a transgender troop he has a lot of respect for them. I'm simplifying it so
mm,
much, but the courage for him to come forward and say that, I
yes,
thought
yes,
was really powerful. And we're seeing in the United States more CEOs who are stepping down, more university presidents who are stepping away because they cannot align with what they're being forced to do,
yes, yes,
what they're being asked to do. I saw one yesterday where a university president was stepping down because he said, I don't believe this, but I can't affect the jobs of everyone else below me. So I need to step away and see what happens. And it's great role modeling for all of us. I just wish it was happening in a higher multitude.
yes,
And I
yes,
think it will. I
yes.
think it will as things move
Really,
forward.
really, really brave people. And as you say, wonderful that there are some examples there of people in very influential positions taking this decision and recognizing this alignment between their
Such
own
courage.
high,
Yeah.
deep values and the job they're
Mhm.
doing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Mm.
maybe we need to acknowledge with ourselves, as we said, be gentle with ourselves and in the world. Honesty takes a lot of courage.
Yes.
Conversely, intellectual dishonesty among politicians, such as manipulating facts, cherry picking data, or relying on misinformation, erodes public trust and undermines the democratic process. Yes, we certainly know this,
Mm.
don't we? Sadly, as we know only too well, some of our democracies have been threatened by highly filtered or deliberately dishonest propaganda and the autocratic tendencies of some. In our countries in recent years, we've seen a number of instances of dishonesty in political leadership, often involving deception, cover ups, or misuse of power. For example, in the UK, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his staff were found to have held gatherings in Downing Street, contrary to the government's own rules. Johnson initially denied wrongdoing, but later admitted to attending some events. A parliamentary investigation concluded he had misled Parliament, leading to his resignation. Well, there's one instance where the lie was caught and something happened,
Yeah.
but there are so many times that it's just swept under the rug
It
now.
took him quite a while to admit to it as well. It was really
Yeah.
quite incredible. Yeah. In the US, as listeners will know, President Donald Trump was impeached twice. First for his abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and second for incitement of insurrection following the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Trump repeatedly claimed the 2020 election was stolen, despite a lack of evidence, and pressured officials to overturn results, leading to widespread accusations of dishonesty. Claims and counterclaims about the authenticity of a laptop allegedly belonging to Hunter Biden also became a political flashpoint, with accusations that some politicians misrepresented facts for party gain. Some of these matters remain allegations, but have raised questions about honesty and transparency in government.
So, why do some leaders choose to be dishonest? That's for a range of reasons, often driven by personal, strategic, or psychological motivations. As we spoke about in the last episode, maintaining power and influence is a common reason some leaders lie to retain control, achieve political objectives, or manipulate public opinion in their favor. Dishonesty may be used as a tool to secure votes, cover up mistakes, or maintain a positive public image. Facing constant scrutiny and criticism, leaders may also use dishonesty as a defense mechanism to avoid blame, protect their reputation, or evade accountability for failures or scandals. We're not telling you anything you don't already know. Personality traits such as narcissism can predispose some to lie compulsively, as we've talked about in the past few episodes. While in highly competitive or polarized environments, leaders may believe that dishonesty is necessary to win against opponents or achieve immediate goals, even if it undermines long term trust.
Mm.
Worryingly, if dishonesty is perceived as common or even expected among leaders, it can become normalized. And I think that's happening, don't you, Clive?
Yeah,
Leading to a cycle where leaders and followers both become more accepting of lies.
that seems to have been
And
going on for a good 10 years now, I
yeah,
would say,
yeah.
almost to a point where it's accepted, it's normal.
So now, when group identity is strong, followers may tolerate or even encourage dishonesty if it appears to serve the group's interests or moral beliefs. This can incentivize leaders to bend the truth or to outright lie, knowing their supporters will overlook this.
Mm. I don't know how
Yeah.
this has come about, really, and why there has been this great change in the acceptability of lies.
I think it's the justification of the polarization.
Yes, it's hard to know because I can't imagine that children being raised today aren't still being taught in schools. I hope they are
We hope.
by their
Hmm.
parents and so on
Hmm.
to be honest. But perhaps children, as we know as well, and we've been there ourselves, I'm sure, are very good liars when they want to be.
Hmm.
But yes, it's more what we're seeing among high-profile politicians especially, that it works, I guess. It has won elections. It lies are told during referendum and election campaigns that people believe, and the facts don't matter, it
Right.
seems. Mm.
Right.
When leaders aren't honest, the consequences can be severe and far-reaching, affecting not only the leader themselves, but also their organization, team, and society at large. Not only may an erosion of trust result, but in politics, dishonest leaders can damage the reputation of their entire party, leading to the loss of public support and electoral seats over time. We saw how this dramatically played out in the UK in last year's general election, when millions who had traditionally voted Conservative deserted the party out of contempt for the shenanigans of Boris Johnson's so-called Partygate, as we were just describing, and other perceived acts of corruption and self-serving within the party. Ironically, perhaps, a widespread view that politicians are generally dishonest may cause a new problem for those who resolve to commit to what they say, come what may. Here we might take as an example the current dilemma that the UK's Labour government finds itself in, with the party having committed itself in its pre-election manifesto not to raise taxes. Now it finds itself having a treasury that is struggling to raise enough revenue to fulfil other promises. It may need to take an about-face to go back on that policy, given that circumstances have changed and the extent of the shortfall in funding may not reasonably have been known before the party came to power. This may be typical of a situation where it's better for politicians to be ready to go back on a commitment rather than holding on to it at any cost. Such would not be so much an issue about honesty, but serving a country's best interest, even if they were to make themselves prey to much criticism and possible political fallout in the process. And within organizations, dishonesty undermines the trust necessary for effective collaboration and loyalty, and decreases employee morale and productivity. Dishonest behavior can expose organizations to legal repercussions, including lawsuits, regulatory fines, and even criminal charges. High-profile cases like Enron and Wells Fargo illustrate how such misconduct can result in massive financial losses and even the collapse of an organization.
So, why is honesty important in personal relationships? And this one might seem obvious, but it's worth bearing in mind that game playing and subtle levels of dishonesty often go on in many people's relationships with others, even with our nearest and dearest. Some of this happens at a subconscious level, as I said before, as we seek to either dominate, align with, or submit to a relationship in different contexts. Patterns of behavior that psychologist Eric Berne famously wrote about in his 1964 book, Games People Play, which introduced his theory of transactional analysis.
Yeah, I was thinking here of a very simple example in my own family. My late father, bless him, always used to insist on paying bills and kind of refusing to take gifts and so on from others to pay their share, which was very nice. But I do wonder what the motivation was. Was this all about not wanting to cause offense, not wanting to be seen unpopular, and also denying the opportunity for others to joyfully give,
Yeah, right,
which,
right,
perhaps he didn't recognize at all. But that was just something from my own family. And I followed that pattern for a long while until one day I woke up and realized this is ridiculous.
right.
There are days to serve and there are days to be served.
Well, and there's so many times, it's difficult to be honest in a family situation because you don't want to, quote unquote, rock the boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just keep things status quo. So yeah, it's not easy.
No, no. And I
And
must admit, when it comes to paying bills, sharing a meal,
yeah,
meal bill comes around. Well, if I've had, this is never the case in my case, I've had far less than everybody else. I don't want to be
yes,
paying, you know, if I'm honest, if I'm really honest, I don't really want to be paying an equal share, even though I may not say anything about it and just go ahead and do it and not have a problem with that. I'm not doing it begrudgingly, but yeah, again, it's one of these very subtle examples, isn't it? If really,
mhm.
really deep down, well, why can't we be fair about this? Assuming everyone has a more or less equal opportunity to pay and contribute.
Mm. Speaking our
Speaking
truth.
our truth.
Yeah, and it's honesty is like we're saying is of course crucial in personal relationships because it forms the foundation for trust, understanding, and emotional intimacy. And that can have an effect, like you were saying, Clive,
Mm.
when partners are honest with each other, they create a safe environment that allows for vulnerability and mutual support, and growth can flourish. But without this, relationships often suffer from confusion, resentment, and emotional distance. And I think I'd add to that dwindling respect
Yes.
for the
Yes.
person who isn't honest
Yeah.
with you, and of course, trust.
And perhaps the game playing becomes more obvious as well.
Yes.
And that as well is going to add to this erosion of trust, I would think. So communicating openly with a partner may be difficult, but allows each person to be truly seen and understood, fostering a deeper connection and stronger bond. Honest communication also helps to reduce misunderstandings and resolve conflicts more effectively, as both partners can address issues directly and with clarity. And also, importantly, honesty encourages both individuals to take responsibilities for their actions and work together to strengthen the relationship, what must surely be an important aim for any partnership. However, dishonesty can subtly infiltrate personal relationships in ways that may not be immediately obvious, as we were saying just now, often starting with small, seemingly harmless behaviors. For example, people often tell small lies or omit information to avoid conflict. I know that one myself. To protect their partner's feelings or prevent uncomfortable conversations. Such things as pretending to like a gift or hiding minor habits may feel harmless, but over time, these can create distance and undermine trust. Avoiding direct questions, giving vague answers, or reacting defensively to innocent inquiries can be early signs of dishonesty. These behaviors may be dismissed as moodiness or stress, but may signal a deeper issue.
Ironically, when someone repeatedly insists on their honesty or uses excessive flattery, it can be a red flag.
Mm.
This tactic may be used to distract or manipulate, making it harder to notice underlying deception. Another common red flag is not sharing true feelings or important details, like being upset but saying everything's fine, which can slowly build emotional walls between partners and prevent genuine connection. Those who are dishonest may shift blame or deflect responsibility to avoid accountability, sometimes even making their partner doubt their own perceptions, a tactic that can border on gaslighting. Intention senders may appreciate that the energies we sense at a subconscious level will be at play here.
Mm.
Yeah, that I think that's important.
Mm.
Such behaviors can develop gradually. However, over time, they can undermine trust and intimacy, sometimes without either partner really understanding what has changed, especially if they're not tuned in to what's happening at an energetic or soul to soul level.
Mm.
And I've been thinking of the book. One of my favorite all time books is The Four Agreements.
Oh, yes, yes.
Don Miguel Ruiz,
Hmm.
who, be impeccable with your word, which is, of course, being honest and more than that. And don't make assumptions where you have to ask the questions. I think, can we put that in the show notes?
Yes,
A
absolutely.
link to the book.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great one for this topic.
Definitely. It's a very thought-provoking topic, this. And I think, as you said right at the outset, honesty is something that we might think, is not something we need to to worry about ourselves. But actually, it's really good to take stock, isn't it, once in a while, and really look at, especially
Yeah,
these very subtle things that can be going
the
on.
very subtle ones. And
Yeah.
I would tell my kids as they were growing up, you can be dishonest without telling a lie.
Mm.
And I think many of us do that.
Mm.
We think it's okay because we haven't told a lie, but just be aware, right?
Absolutely. All about being aware and mindful.
Mhm. Discernment, wisdom, all those things come into play.
Definitely. So, turning now to where we might hone in with our intention and prayers. So, this is the point you may wish to bookmark. We'll put the bookmark, as always, in the show notes as we invite you to join us in holding intention and in prayer. So just taking a moment to center, become present, let go of everything that may be a distraction as best you can, resolving to be fully attentive, fully focused on these intentions, the suggested topics that have come to us. I will that I will always be able to embrace my thoughts, beliefs, passions, and feelings without fear or shame, taking responsibility for my actions and communicating them honestly to both myself and others.
I ask that I will always be mindful of the often subtle trends that can seed distrust in a relationship, even where the desire of me and the other person in our relationship is to uphold each other's well being and happiness.
I will that I will be ready to give honest feedback to friends where this may help them grow, learn, improve, or avoid harm, in preference to saying what they might want to hear or offering false encouragement. I ask for wisdom to share my true thoughts and emotions with kindness and empathy.
I ask that I will have wisdom to judge when withholding or reframing some information is in the best interests or protecting another person. For example, knowing when this is better than offering false praise for something they've done or propose.
We pray that there will be a readiness of politicians to admit mistakes and U-turns when this is in the best interest of the public they serve, even if they had previously promised to commit to certain policies.
And we will that there will be a readiness of those who have the ear of leaders who are deliberately dishonest to call them out. We ask for them to have courage, even to be whistleblowers where others' safety may be at risk as a result of such dishonesty.
So this week, as we consider the importance of remaining honest both for ourselves and for others, we suggest holding as our main intention. We will that there will be a widespread shift in the collective consciousness towards honoring honesty in political leadership and in all areas of life. Please join us in holding this. And before we close, and not wanting to tell Grandma how to suck eggs here, we thought it would be worth reminding ourselves how we can each practice honesty to deepen our own sense of authenticity. This involves intentional steps that we might sometimes overlook, and so risk our outer expression at times becoming out of alignment with our authentic selves. Clearly, this isn't a good place to be for us intention senders. If we feel complacent that we don't need to keep a check on this, maybe at least some of us need to be more honest with ourselves. So here's a reminder of some practical ways to cultivate and keep this alignment in check.
Firstly, practicing self reflection. In other words, regularly checking in with yourself to understand your thoughts, feelings, and values. Ask questions like, am I being true to myself in this situation? Or how do I really feel about this decision? Journaling can be a powerful tool for self reflection and uncovering patterns in your behavior.
Next, remember to own your own truth. Embrace your thoughts, beliefs, passions, and feelings without fear or shame. Take responsibility for your actions and communicate them honestly to yourself and others. This builds trust and emotional safety in your relationships.
Remember to express yourself openly and respectfully. Share your true thoughts and emotions with kindness and empathy. Being honest doesn't mean being harsh. Communicate your truth in a way that respects both yourself and others.
Allow yourself to be vulnerable by sharing your authentic self, even when it feels uncomfortable. This will strengthen your connections and deepen your sense of authenticity.
Of course, aim to live in alignment with your values. Identify your core values and make decisions that reflect them.
Recognizing and accepting our flaws and mistakes are part of being human. Authenticity includes showing up as our best selves, imperfections and all.
Seek feedback. It may be hard, but ask trusted friends how your actions reflect your values. Sometimes others can see our authenticity more clearly than we can.
And finally, be patient and kind to yourself. Remember that developing authenticity is a lifelong process. Give yourself grace as you learn and grow, and celebrate small steps towards greater honesty both with yourself and others.
So that about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
Thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
and remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Binns and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.